Damn them all. I was told we'd cruise the seas for American gold. We'd fire no guns, shed no tears. Now I'm a broken man on a Halifax pier, the last of Barrett's privateers.
The year is 1778. Do you wish you were in Sherbrooke now? A fictional character in today's song does, despite the fact that the town of Sherbrooke doesn't exist yet, and the man it's named after is only 13 years old. This is one of the few historical inaccuracies in Stan Rogers' Barrett's Privateers that I decided to open this historical documentary with. Keep watching as I continue to unpack this song that somehow became an icon in maritime music. Barrett's Privateers is a classic Canadian sea shanty penned by Stan Rogers in 1977. It follows the story of a man aboard a British North American privateering vessel in the midst of the American Revolution. But this vessel, the Antelope, is unfortunately a scummy, run-down old ship that's ultimately sunk by their American rivals. The writer of the song, Stan Rogers, had a successful music career and often wrote about Canadian history. But let's take a closer look into the person that he was. Much like myself, Stan Rogers grew up in Hamilton, Ontario. From a young age, he was very interested in music and the arts, which was unusual as such a strong, burly young man. He joined a rock and roll band and traveled around as a bass player, where he was mildly successful, but he was yet to discover his true passion. One day his aunt convinced him to try his hand at writing folk music about their family heritage in Nova Scotia. Rogers was hooked, and he went on to become an icon in Canadian folk music with hits like Northwest Passage and The Mary Ellen Carter, before unfortunately his life was cut short in a plane crash exactly 37 years ago today, June 2nd. The lyrics of Barrett's Privateers are unique because they tell a continuous story, with each verse building on the previous. In the song's first verse, Rogers sets the scene for the song. The year is 1778, and they receive a mark from the king. A mark is like a permit to be a privateer, which is essentially a government-supported pirate who would capture enemy merchant ships. This verse also describes the vessel that he would be using for his privateering, which is a rundown old sloop. We then get to the chorus, where the narrator's bitterness towards privateering shines through. It appears as though he believed the life of a privateer would be glamorous and a fun adventure, much like what soldiers believed in World War I. He was sadly mistaken, as he was lied to and he's now a broken man, seemingly the lone survivor. In the second verse, we learn that there's 21 men aboard this ship called the Antelope, with a man named Barrett as the captain. The third verse then talks more about the decrepit state of the Antelope, and how the crew is miserable. In the fourth verse, the Antelope finally sets sail towards Montego Bay in Jamaica in search of American merchant ships, which would be a 91-day journey. The fifth verse sees the Antelope finally come across a Yankee ship, and they approached in to fight with their 4-pounders, which would be relatively small cannons. In verse 6, as the Antelope approaches the American ship is slow because there's so much gold on board. Despite this fact, the Antelope is such a bad ship that it takes them 2 whole days to catch up. 2 cables is equal to 400 yards, or 365 meters. In this verse, the Antelope is this close to the boat, but not quite close enough to do any real damage with their small cannons. The cannons do a little more than a din, which is an unpleasant noise, before the American ship sinks them with 1 cannonball. The Antelope is now falling apart in this verse, killing the captain and taking both of the narrator's legs. Finally now, at age 23, 6 years after setting sail, the narrator makes it back to Halifax, but he's now a broken man. Hence the line in the chorus, "Now I'm a broken man on a Halifax pier." To get a better understanding of the origins of this song, we need to head to my former hometown, Sudbury, Ontario, in the year 1977. While performing at the famous Northern Lights Festival Boreal, Stan got to know another popular folk band called the Friends of Fiddler's Green. He was inspired by their folky, sailor music style that you can't help but sing along to. Rogers began to write about his family heritage of privateering in the American Revolution for the British North American forces, and the rest is history. This classic sea shanty has become an iconic song in Halifax and across the Maritimes. If you were to go into just about any vintage bar in the region today, you can expect to hear Barrett's Privateers played at least once. And the best part, everyone in the whole place is going to sing along. To really see how important this song is to East Coasters, I decided to interview local newfie Ethan McBrien. So as a newfie, what does this song mean to you in all of Atlantic Canada?
It's kind of catchy.
Wow, powerful words for a powerful song. You're likely to hear the song at many universities on the East Coast, as well as if you're sailing in the Royal Canadian Navy. Barrett's Privateers is synonymous with Atlantic music in Canada, as it represents so much of their heritage and culture. The song has been covered multiple times, most notably by the Irish Descendants and Poor Angus. It's also worth mentioning that the rock and roll band Ailstorm did a heavy metal version of it that I thought was awesome. You can see how this could become such an important song in Canada, as it truly represents a large part of our identity, history, and culture. Who better to talk to about Canadian identity than some other Canadians themselves? So I decided to go out and ask people in 1 or 2 words, how would you describe Canadian identity? And then I'm going to work really hard and make a couple of big reaches to tie those into Barrett's privateers.
Inclusive.
Privateers were just ordinary people, some poor, some rich, but they were all just looking to make some money and make a difference for their country. While Canada at this time wasn't as diverse as it is today, you can see lots of elements in today's inclusiveness in privateering.
Tough.
One could easily see how tough these men were. Even though their circumstances were difficult, they persevered through because that's what they needed to do, and that's just what the Canadian spirit is.
Adventurous.
This journey would have been such an unknown for the men in this story. 91 days to Montego Bay on a crappy old boat, and they really didn't know what was going to meet them on the other side. This truly shows the adventurous spirit that Canadians have displayed all the way throughout history.
Advocates for change.
The man in Barrett's privateers is clearly fed up about his experience. After all, he does say "God damn them all" 9 times over the course of the song. He understands that his treatment was inhumane, much like how Canadians today are fighting for social justice. And I think that's flippin' awesome.
Polite.
Okay, I did just mention that he says "God damn them all" 9 times, so it's pretty hard for me to connect this one. Moving on. Well, I jokingly mentioned one historical inaccuracy near the beginning of the program where Stan Rogers took some artistic liberty on the name of the town. There are many parts of the song that reflect the true stories of privateers. It's indeed true that it was a rough life, sailing on often run-down boats, risking your life to capture enemy merchant ships. Very few privateers were ever actually sunk, but it was always a possibility. The song reflects our Canadian history, as it shows that we've always been people who will stand up for our land. Even through rough times in history, Canadians have risen to the occasion and have punched above our weight. In a massive war between the United States and Great Britain, one wouldn't think the tiny little British North America would be very powerful, as more than just a place to base British troops. However, people like the privateers in Halifax proved their worth and made do with difficult circumstances, as Canadians have throughout history. So after all this information, that brings me to my last question. What's the main point Stan Rogers is trying to get across? My interpretation is that there's 3 main points. Let's take a look at what those are. Firstly, he's trying to say that Canadians have a tough, rugged spirit. Secondly, he's just talking about the horrors of war and how devastating it can truly be. And thirdly, it's just a fun drinking song that East Coasters can be proud of. Barrett's Privateers is an iconic song in Eastern Canada, as it represents the tough, hard-working attitude of Canadians and our culture and heritage as well. Even in our modern world of musical variety, it's songs like this that truly stand the test of time, just like our strong nation.